So till now we talked about data binding, where we were transferring the data from the component class to the template. But what about transferring the data between components? Let's see what is data sharing and then we'll understand how can we transfer the data between these components. Let's go ahead. To share data in between the components, the input and output decorators can be used for communication between components having parent and children relationship. It means for now we'll be looking at a sharing way where one component is a parent to the other component. Like right now we had an app component in which we made the first component. So the app component is the parent and the first component is its child. Let's see in the code to get a better feel of that. So we have, after making the first component, we got this first folder inside our app folder. Inside this app, we had this app.component.html where we used the app first to run our component. So our component is being called inside this app component, which means app component is the parent and our first component is the child component. So now we'll be looking at how can we transfer data between this app component to this first component. Let's open this app component TS file. So we have simple one property here, which is title and nothing else. Let's try to add a new property which says parent message, and this can be of string and which could say this is from parent component. Let's save this. So we want this variable or this property parent message to be transferred to our first component. Now to do that, we'll go to this app component.html file, and here we will use property binding. How do we use a property binding here? So to use a property binding, first we use a square bracket and that is equals to some variable. This variable is inside our app or our TS file, and here we give the property. So here we will give this variable name or this property name. And what should we give inside this square bracket? This is where we'll give the variable name uh, which the component, the app component will receive. The first component will receive. So let's say child variable. Now let's define this child variable in our first components TS file. So first component.ts file. Now here we cannot just directly define it and then the value will be transferred. This is where the at the rate input decorator comes into play. So we write at the rate, then input, then within the parentheses, we give the same particular variable which we gave as a property inside our HTML file. So this child variable will come here as a string. Now after that, we can define a variable or a property which we can use to which we can use for interpolation and print the data on an HTML page. So let's say message from parent, and this can be of type any because we don't know what type of data will be coming. So it's better to have type any. This is a way we have actually defined, and we are saying that whatever input is coming by the name of child variable, deliver it to this property, which is message from parent. And now we can use this message from parent property in our HTML, and we can use interpolation to print the data stored in it. Let's have a new H3 element which says message from parent, and right below this, within our two curly braces, we give this name of the property or the variable name. Let's save this and go back to our page. We see this is from a parent component getting printed here. Now let's try. Let's zoom in a bit. Now let's try to change this at the same time to see if it's actually linked to the variable in a parent component. We go back to our app component.ts file and let's try to change and write something more after this string. And we add some more text into the string, and let's go back to our page. We see the same thing gets printed here. So whatever we are seeing is actually binded to this property, which is in the parent component of the component we are actually displaying in this page. So this is how we use @input decorator to transfer data from parent component to the child component. So the first thing we did was we used an @input, then within the parentheses and with as a string, we gave the name of the variable which we used inside our parent HTML while connecting it as a property binding. Then we can give the local variable which will save the data and which we can use in interpolation to display the data. While in that HTML where we give our app components HTML tag, there in that HTML tag, we can add this property to connect these two variables. This was the way we use @input decorator to transfer the data from parent component to child component. Now let's have a look how we can do the reverse of that using @output decorator. So let's go to the next slide. Now let's talk about how we can transfer the data from the child component to the parent component. Let's go back to our code. So to do that, let's just review what we did while transferring data from the parent component to the child component. So the crux lies here. When we were calling the child component with the HTML tag, we use this property binding. And with the help of this property binding, we were able to transfer the parent message variable to the property, which was actually a variable in the class of the child component. But the reverse is not possible because we don't have the HTML component or the HTML element of the app of the parent component here. So what we can do is actually we can create an event and then transfer that event from that child component to the parent component. Let's see how we can do that. First, let's go to our child component, and similar to what we had uh, a decorator and input decorator, similarly now we will need an output decorator. So to use the output decorator, we use the and at the rate sign, then O capital, then output. Remember to use the one which has some text written after it so that it automatically imports the output from the desired destination. So you can verify that after clicking this, the output was automatically added here and it was imported. So we need not to worry about that. If you face any error, please verify that you have imported the input and output in the import setting here. Now let's go ahead. With this output, we can have a new event. And how can we make the new event? We can have the variable name of the event. We can say it as child event, and that is equal to, now we need to create an object which is an event emitter. This is sort of an event emitter which will emit an event. So to create an object, we use the new keyword, then the class name. It is event emitter. Again, you can use the one with the text after it so that it imports automatically. Don't forget the parentheses, then close it. So now child event is a property which is of type event emitter. Now let's create an event and we can then use some DOM event to trigger that. To trigger that, we need some function. So let's create a function, or here we call it method. So fire event. And in this method, we can say this dot child event dot emit, and with this emit function or a method of child event or the event emitter, you can say we can send the string to our parent class or parent component. So we can say hello from the child component. Now let's create a DOM. Let's attach this to a DOM event in our HTML file with a button maybe so that we can call this method. Let's go to our HTML file. Now let's create a button, and now we can use the event binding here using parentheses. Then inside that we specify the DOM event and then click, and within the now we can give the function name or the method name, which is fire event with parentheses because it's a function. Now close the button, and inside the button we can write click to send text to parent. Now we have emitted the event, and when we'll click the button, this fire event function or the method will be called. Now let's go to our parent component and try to receive this event there. So let's go to our parent HTML file. Here now we can use the event binding rather than using the property binding. Let's delete this. Yeah. So now we use the event binding. So to use the event binding, we say the event here, and this within the parentheses, and this is equals to some JavaScript inside this. So within the event, we can give the name of the event we want to we have just made, and it was child event. Now let's save it here, and this is equals to we can save the message into some variable, maybe message child variable is equal to We specify dollar for variable, and we use a variable called event. So this is the JavaScript which says whatever is in a event, the variable event is equals to the message child variable. Now let's define this message child variable in our parent class. So this can be of type any for now. And now let's show that this message child is actually getting updated by using interpolation. We can copy this and go to our parent HTML file and replace this text within the h2 element, and inside our curly braces, double curly braces, we can interpolate this variable. So let's see if it's working. Let's go back to our page, and we have this button here which says, you can see the hello word was deleted and there is nothing here because right now the message child value is nothing because we haven't clicked the button. So when we'll click the button, the DOM event click will happen, and along with that there's a function, and that function says fire event, and within that fire event we have defined to emit an event which sends a string, and that string is getting replaced here with a message child variable, and that message child variable is will be displayed within the h2 element when we'll click it. So let's try that. So we got this hello from child component. So this is the value which we are passing from the child component to the parent component using a DOM event. Let's go back to our slides now. So the first thing we did, we used an output decorator, and after that we defined the variable name or the property name which we want to give to this new event. And then we created an object using new keyword. Then we use the event emitter class. Then within a function or a method of this child class, we defined a method, and inside it we called this child event and use its method of emit, and there we gave the string which we want to send from child class or the child component to parent component. Then in the HTML file of parent component, there we receive this event using our event binding. With the help of curly braces, within the parentheses, we gave the name of event which we are binding, and that is equals to, we write the JavaScript here. And here we use the message variable or the message wherever we want to save is a property inside the parent class is equals to that event, and that event is nothing but that string which we are sending. And later we interpolated this message property to the parent HTML page so that when we click this button or when the event happens, the message was getting displayed. So now we have learned how we can flow the data between the parent component to the child component, or the reverse, the child component back to the parent component.